Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into the absolute game changer that is Atomic Habits by James Clear. But before we get to the science, I need you to picture this. It's the last day of sophomore year of high school. A kid gets struck directly between the eyes with a swinging baseball bat. The impact was so violent, it literally crushed his nose into a distorted U-shape and sent the soft tissue of his brain slamming into the inside of his skull. Within minutes, his body just started shutting down. He couldn't swallow, he couldn't even breathe. And that boy in this completely terrifying story, yeah, that was the author himself, James Clear. He was rushed from his local high school onto a helicopter straight to a major hospital in Cincinnati. After suffering multiple seizures, doctors actually had to put him into a medically induced coma. Over the next year, James went through this incredibly grueling rehabilitation. We're talking double vision, having to completely relearn basic motor patterns. Just walking in a straight line was a struggle. His life was, for all intents and purposes, completely out of his control. And because he literally couldn't make any massive, sweeping changes to get his life back on track, he had to rely on the absolute smallest of daily habits. Things like making his bed, going to sleep early. These tiny atomic improvements slowly rebuilt his confidence and eventually led him to become an academic All-American athlete. He learned the hard way that, when you can't take a giant leap, you just have to take tiny steps. Section 1. The Power of 1%. The British Cycling Miracle. Okay, let's dive into this. To truly grasp the sheer power of these tiny steps, we need to zoom out from James's personal trauma to a much larger stage, British cycling. So get this. For 110 years, they were basically the laughingstock of Europe. They'd won exactly one Olympic gold medal since 1908. Their track record was so embarrassing that top European bike manufacturers actually refused to sell them gear. No way, right? They were terrified it would ruin their brand image. But then, in 2003, this guy, Dave Brailsford, takes over. And he brings this relentless, kind of bizarre strategy that he called the aggregation of marginal gains. Basically, he wanted to find a tiny 1% improvement in everything. And I mean everything. Look at this list. They redesigned the bike seats to be just slightly more ergonomic. They rubbed alcohol on the tires for better grip. But then they went totally rogue. They actually hired a surgeon to teach their riders the absolute best way to wash their hands so they wouldn't catch a cold. They even painted the inside of their team transport truck pristine white, just so they could spot tiny specks of dust that might mess up the finely tuned bikes. 1% better, literally everywhere. And guess what? It didn't take decades to work. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the 2008 Beijing Olympics roll around, and the British cycling team absolutely dominated. They won an astounding 60% of the available gold medals in road and track cycling. And the momentum only accelerated from there. Over the 10-year span from 2007 to 2017, using this exact same crazy system of tiny improvements, they captured an unbelievable 178 world championships. And if that wasn't enough to blow your mind, they also secured 5 Tour de France victories in just 6 years. This was a race they hadn't won a single time in the previous century. This aggregation of marginal gains completely and totally transformed the sport. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the math behind all of this. We so often convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action, right? But the numbers tell a completely different story. If you can manage to get just 1% better each day for 1 year, the compounding effect means you don't just become a little better. You actually end up nearly 38 times better by the time the year is up. It's like habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Think of it like piloting an airplane. Say you're flying from Los Angeles to New York City. If you adjust the nose of that plane just 3.5 degrees south right at takeoff, you won't even notice the shift in the cabin. It's literally just a few feet. But magnify that across the entire United States, and that tiny, microscopic change in trajectory means you end up landing in Washington, D.C. instead of New York. An incredibly slight change in your daily habits guides your ultimate life destination to an entirely different place. Section 2. The Plateau of Latent Potential, the Valley of Disappointment. But okay, here's where we hit a massive psychological barrier. If the math is so incredibly clear, why is it so frustrating to stick with good habits early on? Why do we all quit the gym after like 3 weeks? Well, imagine you have an ice cube sitting on a table in a freezing room. You can see your breath, it's 25 degrees. Then the room slowly heats up. 26 degrees, 27 degrees, 28, 29, 30, and the ice cube is still just sitting there. You've put in all this energy heating the room, and absolutely nothing has happened. But then it hits 32 degrees. The ice finally begins to melt. A 1-degree shift, which seemed no different than any of the ones before it, unlocks this massive change. Notice the massive gap plotted here between what we think should happen and what actually happens. We always expect our progress to be perfectly linear, right? We want a one-to-one return on the effort we put in today. But compounding simply doesn't work like that. The most powerful outcomes are always delayed. When you start a new habit, you enter this deeply frustrating valley of disappointment where your expectations far exceed your reality. But listen, your early efforts aren't wasted. They aren't. They're simply being stored up, just like the heat in that freezing room, waiting to hit 32 degrees. You just have to persist long enough to cross this plateau before the compounding magic actually becomes visible. Section 3. Systems over goals. So how do we survive that valley? How do we keep pushing when we're looking around and seeing zero immediate results? Well, the answer directly challenges a lot of conventional self-improvement wisdom. Ready for it? Setting massive goals is actually the wrong approach. We are so obsessed with goal setting. But goals are really just about the results you want to achieve, winning the game. Systems, on the other hand, are about the processes that lead to those results. It's how you actually play the game. If you're a coach, your goal is to win a championship. But your system, that's how you recruit, how you practice, how you manage your staff. And when you look at the data, a truly fascinating truth emerges. Every single Olympian wants to win gold. The winners and the losers share the exact same goals. So logically, the goal itself cannot be what differentiates the winners from the losers. So the absolutely crucial point here is that a goal-first mentality temporarily treats a symptom, but it creates a whole host of problems. First off, achieving a goal only changes your life for a moment. If your goal is to clean a messy room and you clean it, great. But if you keep your sloppy habits, guess what? It's going to be messy again next week. Secondly, goals actually restrict your happiness. You're constantly telling yourself, oh, I'll be happy once I achieve X. You're delaying your own joy. And finally, it creates this terrible yo-yo effect. Think about how many people train for months for a half marathon, cross the finish line, and then just drop their good habits and stop running entirely. The goal is gone, so the habit dies right along with it.
Section 4. 3 layers of change. The identity onion.
All right, moving into the climax of this explainer. To build a system that actually outlasts any single goal, we have to travel down to the absolute deepest psychological layer of why our behaviors stick or fail. It all comes down to 3 layers of change, sort of like an onion. The outermost layer is your outcomes. It's what you get. Losing weight, writing a book. The middle layer is your processes. It's what you do. Going to the gym, writing a page a day. But the core, the absolute deepest layer, is your identity. It's what you fundamentally believe, your worldview, your self-image. Let's move to the next slide and see how this builds. Notice how most people try to change from the outside in. They focus purely on the outcome they want. They say, I want to be skinny, so they force themselves into a new process, like a strict diet. But here's the kicker. They carry around their exact same old beliefs. They are still mentally treating themselves like an out-of-shape person who is just temporarily suffering through a diet. And this brilliantly illustrates the alternative, the secret to lasting change. It's an inside-out approach. True behavior change is actually identity change. You start by focusing entirely on the person you wish to become, and you let the processes and outcomes naturally radiate outward from that brand new belief. Let's use a very specific comparison to highlight this. Imagine 2 people trying to resist a cigarette. The first person says, no thanks, I'm trying to quit. Now, that's outcome-based. They still fundamentally believe they are a smoker, they're just hoping their behavior will temporarily change. But the second person, they say, no thanks, I'm not a smoker. It is a tiny, tiny shift in vocabulary, but it reveals a massive shift in underlying identity. Smoking was a part of their past, not their present. When your behavior and your identity are fully aligned like that, you aren't fighting willpower anymore. The right behavior just becomes automatic. Section 5. Shaping your identity. So, the ultimate question becomes, how do we actually go about forging a new identity from scratch? Well, you aren't born with preset beliefs. Your identity is learned and conditioned through your experiences. As the author beautifully puts it, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. And hey, let me reassure you here, you do not need to be perfect. In any election, there are going to be votes for both sides, right? You're going to have days where you eat junk food or you just hit snooze and skip a workout. And that's totally fine. You don't need a unanimous vote to win an election, you just need a majority. You just need to accumulate enough daily habit votes to build undeniable evidence of your new, upgraded identity. Let's break down this incredibly simple 2-step process. Step 1. Decide the type of person you want to be. Not what you want to achieve, but who you want to be. Step 2. Prove it to yourself with small wins.
Remember, true behavior change isn't about reading a single book. It's about becoming a reader. Every single time you write a paragraph, you are a writer. Every time you practice a chord on the guitar, you are a musician. You are casting votes for that identity.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this profound personal prompt. Seriously, stop obsessing over the final score. Stop staring at the scoreboard. Ask yourself right now, who is the type of person that could get the outcome I want? Find that identity. And then go cast your very first atomic vote for your future self